Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Zav here with Dave Hinkle. How you doing, Dave?
Pretty good. How you doing, buddy?
Good, and we are here to play War of the Roses, and we have a special guest from Fatshark, Mr. Gordon Van Dyke, senior producer on the game. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
So, could you give us a little rundown, first and foremost, like what War of the Roses is all about?
Sure. War of the Roses is basically a competitive medieval melee combat game set in the 15th century England during the Wars of the Roses, which was a civil war and that took place in England between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. And this was like a really kind of brutal conflict, right? Like you're talking about like dead men in the streets, kind of brutality. And I know before we talked a little bit about it, you said there was something that made kind of this conflict unique. In that, if I'm correct, there were actual nobles being killed, which was before that time kind of unheard of. Yeah, it was a war that had a lot of unorthodox things that took place. There was some battles in the winter. There was noblemen being killed. There were also the noblemen, noblemen being killed, and there was a town battle. It actually started off with basically a street brawl in the streets of St. Albans. So it was quite a chaotic experience for England, where the actual the people of the peasants and stuff were probably the most safe compared to anybody else because they wanted to take kingship, and they didn't want the people to hate them at the same time. So it was very very different experience, I think.
Okay, we're going to start it up in just a second here. If you guys could give me a minute while we run through just a technical issue, and then we're going to start up the stream, but feel free to have a nice little conversation.
Is this a live conversation that's live right now?
Yeah, we're live. We're doing it live.
We're doing it live. Awesome. Obviously, Gordon, you've got a lot of history in games, and most notably, you come from working on Battlefield, which is, I guess you could say, the polar opposite of a medieval multiplayer-driven melee combat game. In that Battlefield had guns. I mean, how has that kind of been for you, transitioning from a shooter product to a game that's really kind of it's really deep kind of melee combat that's all about collision detection and things like that.
Well, luckily there's a lot of core things that are the same. I mean, you're striving for the same basic fundamental aspect of multiplayer gaming, which is the competitive aspect, and trying to create the team-based element. So in that area, luckily that was very the same. But yeah, the experience of having some characters that had no ranged possibilities at all versus one that did have a ranged possibility, like an archer versus a footman,
Right.
it very created a challenging dynamic. And the main thing was to just really try and look at how things were and make sure that things were accurate and realistic. I think a lot of multiplayer guys, they know that they're going to die at some point in a battle, and I think that the thing is that the key was make sure it makes sense. It's logical. If an archer hits you, the next time you spawn back in, you would pick a kit that could help you in that situation if that's the route you want to take. If you wanted to, approach that other ranged character, you have that leverage of spawning back in as a ranged character as well. So I think that I think I don't know, just sticking to those core basics, making sure that everything was as accurate and believable as possible, kind of helped us just kind of naturally create that dynamic and make it really a believable scenario. And we have really good lead designer who's been in the industry for a long time. He actually has credits on some Dreamcast games. So his name's Morten Stormdahl. So basically, he designed an epic combat experience, and around that, everything kind of evolved naturally, I guess.
Right, and so the War of the Roses is in development at Fatshark. You're a senior producer, right, with Paradox.
Yes.
Who's the publisher? And Fatshark's they did Lead and Gold. They did what was it, Hamilton's Great Adventure or something like that. Puzzle platformer, another kind of Lead and Gold is more the multiplayer kind of class-based shooter, objective stuff, things like that. So Fatshark's obviously versed in doing multiplayer things, but the classes are kind of interesting here in War of the Roses. I mean, you have the melee guys, but I had success playing longbowman and kind of hanging back doing support. You'd see two guys kind of in a scuffle in the field, and here I was unleashing my bow and hitting enemies pretty easily. So you don't necessarily have to get up close and personal. How was kind of working with that stuff, like balancing, say a guy with a crossbow as opposed to the longbowman, and making the game work to a point where you wouldn't have just like one uber class and everybody kind of runs in and breaks the game. Like, how hard was it balancing things in that respect?
It was pretty hard. I mean, we went through a lot of iterations and a lot of changes. Some of them are a little bit, not in my field of expertise. It was our designer that, really took on those challenges and accomplished them. But like one example is for the crossbow, having that reload mechanic and actually, forcing that player to have to bend over and actually, physically put the bolt into the crossbow, as well as the archer pulling the arrow from his quiver and on his back and pulling it down and placing it on the bow. Putting in those elements kind of really sticking to kind of behaviors that would happen. Obviously we present it in a game way, but having those fundamental basic things there again goes back to the organic naturalness of it being
Right.
kind of a balanced scenario. The fact that it is very difficult, I mean, it does take some skill. I mean, I for one didn't hit the first person I shot at with a bow, and it
Right.
did take some good timing. And I think that the skill needed and the timing and and the preparation to get to that point helped kind of just lead again into that more organic, natural balancing of the weapons. And of course, there's a lot of tuning that goes in on the other side. Creating different arrowheads that kind of gave you different behaviors, creating different reload mechanisms that would give you, a different advantage, but also give you a disadvantage at the same time.
Right.
I think if you always look at your design and say, okay, if I'm gaining this, what should I be sacrificing against that makes sense in the context of the game?
hmm And and that's one of the things that's kind of interesting. I mean, you talk about arrowheads and things like that. I mean, one of the big things you guys are touting with War of the Roses is the customization stuff, and that goes down to fighting styles, the type of head you have on a poleaxe, the type of metal it is, and things like that, and so it's really deep in that regard. And this guy just charged Zav here, who's trying to shoot him with a bow and arrow, and of course, you get in that situation, you're going to get slaughtered. But so I mean, was that always the goal from the beginning? Was that you knew it was going to be a multiplayer game, and you really wanted to have like a very, very deep customization system?
Yeah, I mean, we always that was like pretty much the two primary things that our CEO actually came up with the concept for this game, the high level concept. He wanted to do it based one in this setting, so he had kind of like three primary objectives: base it in this setting, have a really great persistence system, so unlocks, stats, ranking, all those great things that are very common right now in multiplayer games, and and make it focus on the multiplayer online aspect of it.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to point out, and I've played this game quite a bit, and I've had fun with it each time, and the thing that kind of surprised me is really kind of how deep the collision and melee system is. Like, I mean, here, looking at it this way, it's kind of tough to discern that, like, yes, you can really do precise strikes, and it depends on the way you're kind of swinging the sword, because Zav's moving around, you get in these intense one-on-one fights here, and it's hard not to. But every swing, every type of swing, every direction, it starts with a step. Like, if I step to the left, then I could swing a certain way that I wouldn't swing if I was just standing still. And using a sword and shield here, you kind of have to balance the two, and block and respond accordingly. Like, it's a pretty deep system. and one that I assume you guys are very proud of.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could be wrong. I
Oh,
mean,
there's a killing
I
blow.
don't know every single game, but I think that we have one of the most intricate hit detection systems.
Yeah.
And we have like 97 points of interest on all our weapons that we can tune and control to kind of try and bring them to life in these encounters and in these situations. I mean,
Yeah.
there's times that you'll both swing your weapons at each other, and you'll have a natural parry system where you both hit together
Right.
at the same time. And it's like, I mean, that was the core. I mean, those are one of the primary objectives that we had with when designing this game. It was part of our core element that the hit detection system had to be extremely accurate, extremely precise.
Right.
You know, to really make sure that we make the game accessible. Now, that doesn't mean dumbing it down and just simplifying it. It's like making everything happen the way a person, you know, would think it would happen. We learn a lot of things in the real world, and we wanted to apply those thought processes to this game. And actually, at first, it's so accurate that a lot of people thought that it was broken, or that there was something wrong with it, or that it was wasn't realistic, which is kind of funny. And that, you know, through video games, because of where hardware was at in technology, is that we, you know, it's called a hitbox because it used to be a box around your player,
Right.
which is invisible geometry that would how the server would detect it, because servers back then weren't as powerful, and you know, to measure that precision of hit detection wasn't really possible back then, just due to hardware restrictions.
Right.
And it does make it easier for your server to detect. But we couldn't do that, because if we were going to have you really close and up close and personal, and if things were happening and it didn't make sense, or you were kind of being given the margin of error, it made it really hard to make a fair multiplayer experience.
Yeah.
And another thing that we had to do is the servers. Most modern shooter games are running at 15 frames per second on their shooters. So you run frames per second in shooters as well. So every second is how many times in that 1 second that the server is calculating what's happening with all the players and between all the players and where they are in that world relative to everything else.
Right.
So
Headshot. Zav just got a nice little headshot there. Sorry.
Yeah, so in our game, we run at 60 frames per second because we have no margin of error. And a lot of shooter games on the client side, they actually guess what's happening to your player if it misses information, or if the server, you know, if there's something happens in between those frames per second. And that's why sometimes you have weird things happen in shooters, and it seemed odd, or you thought you should have won that scenario, but you didn't. So we couldn't have that happening in our game, because it's too close up and personal. You know, when you hit your enemy with a sword, you hit them with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hit them with the sword and nothing happened to them, but they hit you and you just died all of a sudden, it would be an extremely frustrating experience, and probably a lot of people would rage quit justifiably.
Yeah. And I just want to point out to Zav. Zav is playing right now. Our wonderful Zav D'Amatos. He's playing on my Steam account, and you know, with the crossbow guy. I mean, obviously he was playing a longbowman a couple minutes ago, and you know, you have different sets of weapons. I mean, you start with the bow out. It's not necessarily the weapon you have to use the whole time. The same way with the guy here who has the crossbow. You saw he switched out. He could go into that little QTE where you have to actually spool up the crossbow. So you have kind of those limitations right there. The guy with the very ornate helmet, I must say, he used a little quick charge ability. So you have certain unlocks and things like that you can use to personalize your character beyond just what the basic state is. This fight right here, which Zav unfortunately lost, a lot of those blue shield icons will pop up because, you know, it's like sword hitting steel, right? It's not really doing a lot of damage, whereas if he had, like, say, a giant club, he would have been a lot better off in that fight, right?
Well, yeah, he would have had a blunt damage object, which is going to be able to you know, grab against armor, and then that's what the weapons actually did. The reason they had like a hammerhead that had a wider front with little small spikes was because they needed to grab the slickness of the plate armor. So our weapons behaved very similar. So what he should have done in that situation was used a thrust attack, and that would have improved his odds. So then he would have been doing a puncture attack
Mm-hmm.
that would have helped him push through the plate armor instead of sliding off of it. If
Right.
you're doing a slashing attack against plate armor, it's very likely that you're going to, it's just going to be deflecting off of that armor. It also should have gone for his face. The guy was wearing a barbute helmet, so he's a little bit better protected, but it's still really hard. Sorry, my daughter's here and my wife.
No, that's okay. I should preface that you are in Sweden. You live in Sweden, and it's probably, I guess, past dinner time there.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm on the west coast of the United States, and it is early in the morning. And Zav is like hunting this guy down. I'm loving watching this here. He's jumping down off of the stairs, and I kind of like to call that staircase there the Highlander staircase, because it reminds me of that scene in the first Highlander movie with Sean Connery. So tell us a little bit about this map and about some of the locations in the game, and where you kind of drew inspiration for them. Did you go like to England? Did you do your historical due diligence?
Yeah, we did a bit later into the project, but it still was extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
This one is Bamberg Castle, and this is where there was a battle between the Lancasters and the Yorks, and so we based it off of that that location, that battle. So all these maps are actually based on actual battle locations. That took place in the First War and one in the Second War. So in the Wars of the Roses, there's actually 3 wars that took place.
Right.
So we've kind of based it around the first and the half of the second one, because the second war only had 2 battles, so it's not much to choose from in that. So then we have like Clitheroe Forest, which was also another famous battle. We have St. Albans, right? It was the very first one in the street battle that took place in the evening, and that's where we've set ours. We have Barnet, which was a big, large field battle, and then we have Mortimer's Cross that took place in a crossing in a small village, and then we have Edgecote Moor, and that took place in a moor, and we actually went to that location during our trip to England, which was really fun. We went to St. Albans as well. And we actually put out some dev video diaries of that trip, and they're pretty fun. There's 2 of them are out, and the third one's coming out pretty soon. Because we also went to this place called Tournament Stud in England, and they do a lot of acting for jousting, and they do tournament jousting. They actually put us in armor, and we dressed up in armor and rode on horses, myself and the lead designer, to see what it felt like. It was really crazy, especially it was my fifth time ever riding a horse, and I didn't fall off though, and I had a sword and everything.
So you got on the full like armor and kind of got in the headspace of like what it was, how hard it was to just say go out and get a half gallon of milk as one of these crazy knights of yesteryear.
Exactly. We also went to the Royal Armory of Leeds and got to touch some actual 15th century weaponry and touch some of the armor from back then. It was extremely light. The articulation, held a gauntlet. The articulation was insane. I mean, they thought of everything. They even had flexibility in the wrist area that would go past your normal flexibility in case you fell and you hyperextended your wrist. The thought that went into this, the craftsmanship, was beyond what you would imagine, and it's really, they were no different than we are now. They're just as smart, they're just as quirky, just as perverted, all of those things. Nothing's really different, just the technology that they had available to them. And this was the cutting edge technology. This was their iPads and super laptops and gaming laptops. This is what they had: armor and crest and arrows and stuff like that.
Right. So we're watching the chat here. Obviously we're streaming live gameplay right now. If you're just tuning in, I'm here with Gordon Van Dyke, the senior producer from Paradox. And so looking at the chat here, Dirty Larry, it's 1 R, so I guess it's Larry. He's asking about post-launch support. Now, I know I ran a piece on Joystiq because I actually got to sit down with you and talk to you a little bit and play alongside you a couple weeks ago. And we did talk about the post-launch plans for War of the Roses. And could you go into that a little bit for the guys in the chat?
Sure. Hold on. My daughter's being a little bit of a whiner.
That's okay.
But basically, we have already sorted everything with Fatshark, so we're going to be working on the game post launch, and we have the ambition of doing updates once a month. Now that's what our goal is. I mean, it doesn't mean we're always going to hit it. We might be a week late or a few weeks late, but we really want to nail the 1 month thing, and we're going to be doing something kind of special with that, where we're giving out the content in a kind of a unique way. We're not going to go into the details of that yet, but you know, that's our ambition, that's our goal,
Right.
and we are going to be supporting it. We're going to be putting out updates in between that as well. If there's issues with the game, if there's balance problems with different weapons, you know, because it is really hard. Like you were talking about the complexity of our weapon system, and you know, it is easy for things to get out of balance or tweaked or kind of out of context that we originally intended, and we're going to go in and fix that.
Right. Okay. And Cypheroth, he asks if shields will be able to actually knock a player off balance so you can hit them, like how they did in the movie 300. I'm not going to finish the rest of that, but there is an actual shield bash skill that I've seen that hits a guy and kind of knocks him off balance. Can you talk a little bit about like some of the class-specific like special abilities and things you can unlock in that respect?
Yeah, we actually have a shield bash perk that you can equip for your shield, that you can when you're in your defensive position using the right mouse button, if you hold the left mouse button, you'll actually pull back and do a bash with that. If you have the round shield, you'll just push them back and kind of give them a quick brief stun.
Right.
If you have if you have the tar shield, you'll which has a spike on it, you'll do a small puncture damage and, you know, get the little stun, which gives you an opportunity to like pull your sword back and prepare your attack before they, you know, and have a little slight advantage over them.
Right, and then we also saw there's like a quick dash skill that you can use to quickly run out of, you know, dangerous situations, or quickly run into them headlong if you want.
Yeah, if you hit their back, you can actually kind of give them a quick knockdown stun as well. The horses do that as well, so it kind of makes sense if a horse runs into you,
Yeah.
you fall out of the way. We actually struggled. We went through a lot of different iterations with that, giving that damage, not giving it damage, and we had to balance with fun. So we went without the damage because it kind of the being on a horse is already powerful enough, and then if you could just barge through people and not even have to use skill with your weapon, it kind of took away that element of skill. So we wanted to pull it back to it being about skill, but there still should be some type of impact to the other player to kind of make them feel like, okay, there's a horse right with me and it just knocked me over. I need to prepare myself and defend my stance.
Yeah.
And there's also the push. I forgot, with the man-at-arms option. Even if you have a weapon, there's a push option where you can kind of push your enemy if they're getting in really close to you, or if you're getting close to them and they have like a poleaxe style weapon where they have to keep a distance from you.
Right.
You can get in there with the push and really hurt them. Or if you have a poleaxe and a player, you know, the enemy, your opponent is getting in really close to you, you can give them a push and pull yourself back so you can get that range you need to hit the precision attack with the blade.
Right. Interesting. So Forgettable Username asks, what made you guys choose this particular period, this conflict, as opposed to, say, a fantasy scenario or like feudal Japan or something like that?
Well, we're Paradox, so I think because our CEO came up with the concept in the stages of time period he really liked. They're not really a huge fantasy game internally. I know we have some fantasy games like Warlock and stuff like that, and Magicka. So we kind of already had a lot of those, and I think there's already a lot of games that are amazing games that kind of cover that genre as well. You know, you have Skyrim and stuff like that. So, you know, we wanted to take it into just a real war, and it was a really interesting time period and setting. It was also a time period where the hand gun style weapons started to come about and become really prolific. And this is also one of the kind of the last wars where the knight was really the significant dominating force in the war. The guns actually, the technology started to really catapult after this. No pun intended with the catapult term, but it really started to, the technology started to surge, and that's when you saw, the kind of the image of the knight became kind of more legend, because now anybody could pick up a gun, but back then to have armor, to have all that proper training, it took a lot of money, and kind of kept that the skilled fighting within those with wealth.
Right. And obviously a real life period being based on you must have caught flack from people in the UK, or other people who are really kind of into these historical conflicts for some of the choices you made, and things of that nature. I mean, did you kind of get anything wrong in the beginning and somebody called you on it, or was there any kind of anecdotal stuff of that nature you can share?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you said books and
We
books.
made some pretty big mistakes. I mean, the first cover art pass that we did, I mean, a guy on our forums, he wrote this intense write-up about the how inaccurate and how just out of context the whole thing was. So we actually went and changed it based on his feedback. I mean, he had a really valid point, and we actually started talking with him, and he's a swordsmith. And he used to do 3D models in video games. So I mean, it was like just crazy coincidence. So we actually started talking to him and having him help us with historical accuracy in the game. And his name's James, and he's in the credits and everything, and helped us write some of the descriptions for it. So after we started working with him, things really smoothed out. So we haven't had too many people yelling at us. Not, at least not recently. I mean, there's a couple of things like the round shield. That there's no real obvious evidence for that coming into popularity until actually the 16th century.
Okay.
So 100 years later. But we still really wanted to use that because it really it was a really great shield to kind of give to our players who are learning the system. So we
Right.
kind of kept that anyways. And a lot of it's just based on what evidence they found, and there's a lot of missing evidence. So a lot of it's more like based on theory, and nothing's ever like 100%, from back then. So
Right.
we just decided to, take that, the luxury of that excuse and put it in the round shield. But like for a long time, people would notice that we had the wrong foils on our Scottish two-handed sword, and we've removed those actually. So that was the last thing that I remember that people really, really were kind of busting our chops about.
And so I mean, just a circular shield. I mean, I guess I assume I'm no historian, only a historian of video games, but I imagine back then they kind of had the taller, more classical looking shield. But from a gameplay standpoint, I mean, the circular shield is good because I mean, at least it's not guaranteed protection. You can still like sweep somebody's legs. It doesn't cover so much of the body that, say, like if they're holding the shield in their left hand, you can't come sweeping in from the left and hit the right side of their body. You still have opportunities like that from a gameplay standpoint. So that's got to be part of the reason why you guys wanted to stick with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it exactly. It doesn't go, and they didn't even really use the tall shields. I mean, it also depended on the region. So we were going specifically on what was known and widely used in England during that time. So another example is we had for a while we had Damascus steel. Because it was well known. There's a legend that it was the steel that could give you the ability to cut through multiple enemies and stuff like that. So we actually changed it to the Toledo steel, which came from Spain, which was common in England during that time. So yeah, I mean that's one example.
I love that Zav's fighting with a shield or with an arrow stuck in his helmet right now, by the way. And he totally had a rescuer, a savior, come up during his conflict and take charge with the axe there, which is pretty great. But so you probably saw even there when Zav was fighting, he's kind of swinging at the body. When you start to initiate your swing, you kind of get that reticle, but you can still aim high or low. So if a guy has and he just got shot with an arrow while he was climbing up that ladder, and that was pretty much death for him. Actually, it was literally death for him. I don't know, pretty much, but you can, like, if somebody has a face exposed, you could slice their face. Like, you can, you know, when it comes down to just like fighting one-on-one like that. Now Zav is back up. You can actually pinpoint those areas and really go for damage, which I think, you know, makes this one of the better kind of melee combat systems that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, like if Zap puts down his visor by hitting V, you'll be able to see that, you know, putting the visor down actually has it has value and it has an impact on your combat experience. So if you have that down, you can get up. You can get shot in the face with an arrow. You can have somebody attack your face with their sword, and that does huge damage. I mean, sometimes if you have enough momentum, you can actually get like an insta kill is what we do. So if you hit over their total hit point value, then they die instantly, and they can't be revived or any of executed. They're just done.
Right.
So you know, that's how intricate it is, and that's how much thought process has been put into this hit detection system.
Right.
It's really want to bring those out. You know, if you hit in between and you hit into the cloth and the gaps of the of your plate armor, you're going to hit that point, and you're going to get that damage from your enemy.
Right.
I think a lot of times, because and accuracy is super important. I mean, you can shoot literally right between somebody's shoulder, you know, like their armpit, shoot right in that gap and go all the way past them and not hit them with the bow. So it's like, sometimes it kind of pisses you off because it is so accurate, but then when you get those hits that, you know, are in your favor, then you really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And Zav just had himself a nice little rooftop battle here. Finished it off with the execution, and the executions are class-based, right? Like, depending on which class you are, that's the type of execution you'll
it's actually dependent on what weapons you have on you.
Oh,
so
okay.
If you have like a two-handed Scottish sword, you'll get the nice gruesome death where you kind of impale your sword into their chest. If you have the round shield on you, you'll do that attack.
Right.
And then if you don't have all those, you'll have you'll do the dagger one, because you always have a dagger. And then we also have one for the executioner's axe, which is pretty gruesome.
Well, I've seen the dagger one. That's the one where you stab somebody in the face like 8 times, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I'm no scientist, but I'm pretty sure that if you stab somebody in the face once, that's death. But I mean, sometimes I guess you just got to stab them like 8 times to make sure they're dead. The shield one is also really good, which we just saw Zab there. And now here he actually put his visor down, so you can see how his view is diminished when he's got it down.
If you get that extra protection, then you need to pay for it for something. Going back to the give and take.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you're getting that extra protection, so now you're gonna have to sacrifice your vision.
Yeah, Zav just stabbed a guy in the back. I think he was getting coffee. He was a little AFK, but yeah. So Cypheroth asks if there will be more shields introduced eventually to War of the Roses. Right now, I guess how many? There are 2. I mean.
Yeah.
He specifically calls out like a kite shield and things like that. I mean,
those were. I mean, like again, going back to we're looking at what we want to do. We want to look at some different styles. I mean, they didn't really use shields that much during this time period. I mean, the quality of the plate armor was so substantial that shields actually became not very common and not really a big huge benefit. It was better to have both hands free and using that for your weapons. But we are looking at that because we want to play around with that. It is a video game after all, and so being extremely realistic all the time sometimes isn't what's most fun.
Right.
So we would definitely want to look at that. We want to look at also trying to find a way to introduce the pulvers, which was a big stationary shield that they would push along and move for archers to hide behind. So we want to play around with those things, and we just want to see what works right. And we're going to be introducing new content into the game, and we're going to be doing it in ways that makes it accessible to everyone. And if we ever introduce a new gameplay element, like we want to eventually introduce the handguns as well, which were the classic style. It was just like basically an iron pipe, really, with a hole in the top for a fuse to light that
Mm-hmm.
you would hold and wait, and that would ignite the black powder.
Right.
So when we introduce anything that's a gameplay, everybody gets access to it right away. So it'll be just a really low level, easy unlock to get. That any player that's been playing it for a while will can be able to grab it right away and start playing around with it.
Okay. And speaking of the unlocks, I mean, we've seen these are the base classes that Zav's been playing around with. I have a couple hours under my belt on my account, so I've accrued some things. But from a customization standpoint, can you talk a little bit about the specifics of the unlock system, how you unlock things? Is there a currency, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the way we do things is we start you off and you first have the 4 predefined profile kits, which is the footman, then you'll unlock the crossbowman, then the archer, and then the footman. It's like level 1, 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And then 5, you'll get access to get a custom kit, start doing your first custom kit. During that time, when you're earning XP from doing various tasks, reviving friends, killing enemies, executing enemies, assisting in the defeat of another opponent, you'll earn experience points and you'll earn money. So back then, most of these guys were paid soldiers, and they also purchased their own equipment. So we took we took a little hint from the historical aspect of that, and let them earn the gold, and then they go in and buy equipment that they've gated their way through leveling up in XP. So we try to kind of hold back some of the weapons that take a bit more experience and knowledge. For example, the poleaxe, we give that to you on the profile kit though, but you have a longsword as your first weapon that you start off with. But it does take a bit more precision, so you'll unlock that a bit later, and you'll unlock bills and different styles of those that also take a little bit more a knowledge of how the system works, and then you buy those with coins, and then you'll be able to upgrade those weapons that you've got, and add new things to them, different types of steel, different edge types. If it's a wooden shaft, you can get hardwood, upgrade it to hardwood. If you have a sword, you can upgrade to a balanced pummel. Just a huge variety of things. I think I could go on and on about that, but that's a kind of a quick overview of that. And same applies to helmets, armor, and perks.
Right. And so, I mean, that's kind of the lifeblood of any, good multiplayer experience, right? Is that you need to have these constant unlocks, constant things for players to kind of, the carrot to chase, if you will, to keep them playing, right? I mean, to keep it fresh.
Yeah, it's like kind of like that RPG element, that really kind of started to mesh well into the multiplayer experience. I mean, it's really fun to acquire things and also to be able to see somebody on the battlefield, and if they have a certain weapon, you have a background story of them quite quickly as well. So it helps you assess the skill level of your opponent. You might be like, whoa, this guy has, this sword, and man, so okay, I know he's got a high rank, and so you can start to visually kind of just start predicting the outcomes of scenarios. Should I run? Should I find some friends? Should I try and get away from this guy? Should I take him on? Or or it's like, what, this guy, he must know what he's doing. If I win this fight, I'm going to be pretty proud of myself. So I'm going to take him on and see what the outcome is.
Right. And one of the things that I've noticed that I think is really good is that, like skill definitely comes into it. I mean, when you get in those kind of tight melee encounters one-on-one, like if you know what you're doing, you're going to be a lot better off than the other guy. But you never feel like you're more powerful than anybody else. You never feel like you are more God mode. You have more health. You have an advantage over everybody else. I mean, you're basically all the same stock guy, but you're pulling from the same pulling from different pools of weapons. So you can have different armaments, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you've been playing this game for 50 hours, you have some kind of advantage beyond just the skill you've earned in a fight against me. And I really like that about this game, because you play a lot of things like shooters, and you play like your Call of Duties and the typical kind of multiplayer games with progression, with levels and things like that, and you do unlock better weapons. You do get things that make you just stock better than the other player, and I think that's pretty refreshing here in your game.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's just kind of more of the setting. I know that when I worked on Battlefield, and that a lot of them, it was a big struggle to find a way. How do you make these things work within this, and not really give just this insane advantage to somebody who clearly has been playing the game more, so they already have the skill advantage, and now you're giving them like a tactical advantage as well, and that's really a difficult scenario to be in. But an M60 is more powerful than a 9 millimeter. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a reason why they made those two different types of weapons, right? They both had their niche area, but it's a really big challenge. But luckily for us, like our game, these weapons kind of naturally did that. It was about the guy who had more training and who did have a deeper knowledge of that weapon. And when they welded, it was different than the next guy. And that's why peasants were kind of stuck in that position that they were in, because they couldn't pick up a sword and go head to head with a nobleman who had been training all of his life with swords. And this
Yeah.
guy's probably had access to it very limited in his lifetime. So, typically they would just get destroyed and killed. And, our game kind of does that same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly understand that, but I would say I would counter a nobleman who's been training with swords his whole life to, the pitchfork wielding commoner, because he's certainly been wielding a pitchfork his entire life. So it's a shame we can't.
The bill came from a farming weapon, and it was sometimes peasants and farmers had to take to the battlefield to protect their nobleman, who was giving them the land to farm and to provide for their family. So sometimes they did have to go out there with almost nothing.
Yeah.
But the chances of them winning though were very slim. It was very much an exception to the rule.
Zav's match just ended here, and I kind of liked some of his tactics at the end. He was playing the longbowman. He kind of snuck into some brush like he was going to hide and get ready to start unleashing some arrows at guys. But then, of course, the timer counted down. Brief encounter with the horse there at the end. He tried to clip its legs. You can take out its legs. But unfortunately, he got lanced in the chest and got wounded pretty hard. He's lucky he didn't get insta-killed there with that, which and that's devastating. I mean, getting like lancing somebody when you're on a horse and being lanced. I mean, they're both very devastating. And how did you guys make sure that wasn't kind of the uber combination, like the way to just win everything in this game?
Well, we kind of did something a bit drastic because it had to be this insanely intensely strong weapon, right? I mean, it had to be powerful. I mean, it was. And so why have it in the game if you're not going to reflect it, with the same type of, in the same light? So what we did was all of our weapons actually break in our game. The shields can be broken as well. So if somebody's just holding their shield up the whole time, you will eventually break it. So after a few really powerful hits, and sometimes if you got an extremely powerful hit, your lance will shatter. So you'll lose having that weapon. And then you have to go to your side weapon, and that takes a huge amount of precision and skill riding on a horse and getting those hits.
Right.
If you go too slow, you're easy target, and your horse is going to get taken out.
Yeah.
So we just have a really long respawn time on the lance. So I think it's about 4 minutes right now, which might be a bit excessive, but we rather have it take longer than somebody being overly powerful and having a weapon that's just too OP'd.
Right. And Zav jumped out of the multiplayer there. He was playing with a bunch of the QA guys because we were talking about horseback. And this is one of the Battlegrounds levels. This kind of gives you a great glimpse at what it's like being on the horse, using the lance, things like that. Can you talk a bit about what the Battlegrounds maps are? Kind of, are they historical recreations of battles? Like what's the Battlegrounds?
Kind of. I mean, I wouldn't say it's historically accurate, but it is a real battle.
Historically inspired, at least.
Exactly. I would say historically inspired. And then we have a bunch of bots, so you can slaughter a bunch of bots and work on your skills with the weapons in a non-competitive environment. I mean, think classic Battlefield 1942, where you basically, you went into one of those maps and you ran a little campaign for that theater. But you were just playing in a team scenario against a bunch of AI, and
Right.
that's what this is. It's I mean it is intimidating when when you're in a multiplayer scenario and you have other people that you're playing against. You can feel embarrassed sometimes, and you can get frustrated if you're not winning as much as you would like to. So so it's great to have this offline experience to really hone those skills and to perfect your abilities with a lot of this unique these unique classes and unique weapons. All of them, most of them are drastically different. I mean, of course, riding on a horse with a lance and couching is a completely different experience than being an archer or being
Right.
a foot knight.
Even Zav's seeing that right now. I mean, he's kind of riding about the battlefield, but it's tough to connect that lance to a moving target. It's
Yeah.
although he just got a guy right there, which is pretty great, but he got wounded in the process. The last life before he died, you probably saw. You probably wonder what happened with the lance and his horse. His horse actually went down, so he's in first person with the lance. The horse goes down. He kind of tumbles to the ground, and then it's like right into the fight there.
Yeah, when you fall down, your lance shatters.
Right. So that's kind of a visual cue to let you know that, like, hey, you can't. You're done
Yeah.
on this horse.
Exactly.
Okay. And everything you do in the battlegrounds, I mean, it's all constantly going towards your profile and your unlocks, correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
That-
Not the battleground stuff.
No. Yeah, it's just strictly offline. We're gonna play around. I mean, the beauty of being on PC and Steam is that we can do updates. We can grow the game in the areas that we see people really wanting to go into that direction, and we're totally open to doing that. Especially in the competitive field, we want to get this game out there. We want to get it in the hands of the people and really keep seeing where it keeps being pushed towards and what it is that they really want to get from it.
Right. And I know you were telling me a little bit about what you guys learned from the beta and some of the unique Steam features that you were able to use as far as troubleshooting and doing fixes and patches with the beta and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about the systems in place that let you kind of update and basically what you told me, the stuff about the beta and all.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a Steam-only game, so
Right.
no matter how you buy the game, it'll always be on Steam. So Steam just has an awesome support system for putting out updates, and we have complete control of that on our end, so we can put those out as rapidly as we need to. So we don't have to wait for a middleman or anything like that, or wait for approval, which, if somebody doesn't really test on their game, could be a bad thing. You
Right.
can introduce a pretty nasty bug. Is every time you change something, you do anything, your potential for opening up a huge bug is extremely high.
Right.
So you have to be really careful, and we're definitely conscious of that, where we don't want to to do that. And then also we can run a special version of that build. So on most games that they have it enabled, if you right click on the properties for that game,
Mm-hmm.
you go on the properties, there's a beta tab, and you can opt into different versions. So we're going to be doing that as well. So we're going to be opening it up so the guys that are really into the game and want to really help push the direction that it's going, they'll be able to opt in to the beta version probably a little while after retail opens and jump on that. And all they have to do is opt out to get back to the normal build if they want to play on there. So it's really easy. There's so many tools available to us now to really kind of push progressing and updating your game and keeping it well tuned, I guess, or almost well serviced, if I can go with an old school kind of saying.
Right. And that's that's got to be exciting. I mean, from your end, but a feature that's only unique to Steam and unique to the PC platform. I mean, did you guys ever? I mean, was this always going to be a PC game right out the boot, right out the gate, or was there ever aspirations of console or?
I mean, console was kind of in the back of our mind, but it was always PC. Paradox is really a PC a company. It's just much easier. There's so much less red tape and things that you have to go through to be on console. I mean, console, it is difficult. Of course, we would love to be on there, but the things that you have to go through are quite substantial.
Right. And for me, I mean, just being on console, like obviously that's the audience and stuff, but I think about how like a game like this would work on a controller, dual analog stick kind of method,
Yeah.
something like that. Um,
We're looking into that actually. We have a concept and tried and did some like really early testing about it. So we're going to look into adding that post launch.
oh, okay.
So Steam has that new big screen thing that they're put into
Yeah,
beta.
the big picture mode. Yep.
Yeah, big picture mode, and that's only going to be for games that support a console, a joypad, on a controller. So if we want to be included in that, well, we're going to have to add that support, and I think it's worthwhile.
Right.
I almost think that you're gonna start seeing more computers turning into almost like the family console is now, is where it's going to be. You're going to jump in, and it's going to be, instead of a home theater PC, you're going to have like home theater gaming PC.
Right. And I mean, if you're, somebody who's living in a studio apartment, essentially your computer's already in your living room anyway. So, that works out. Definitely. But so that's interesting. That's interesting. You guys are thinking about, controller stuff and just trying to adapt the game as much as possible. And you guys, are you doing an actual boxed retail release for War of the Roses, or is it just strictly download through Steam?
It's only download for like US and Europe, except for Germany. Well, Germany is still kind of old school in some areas.
Right.
So they're going to have a boxed version. They're the only ones that I know of, according to our sales team, has a boxed version.
Okay. And will the version in Germany, will that be like censored at all or anything like that? I know they have problems with the copious amounts of blood and the brutality that is very obviously here in this game.
Yeah. We just got rated. We got rated 18.
Okay.
So we got the highest rating, and yeah, they're. I think they've eased off a little bit, but one of the things that they really start getting upset about is like any post-mortem interaction. So when you get knocked down, you're not dead. So we don't have that. The body's dead. You can't really interact with it. They're also against a lot of violence to women and children and stuff like that, and we don't have any of that. So we've kind of stayed out of their anger zone. But of course, we're probably on the borderline. We wanted to show a trailer at Gamescom. That's their Europe's version of E3, and it's in Germany. And we wanted to show the ranged trailer, and so I think Koch Media wanted to show it, and it basically was so violent that there's nothing that you can do that would let.
Yeah.
Except for in a closed private room.
Right, and we posted that on JoyStix, and it's basically a lot of guys dying by arrows to the face, and which is fitting because Zav did just get a couple crazy headshots there. The only thing that's unfortunate in this situation with the Battlegrounds is that when he hits guys far away with the bow and stuff like that, there's no visual indication that like what damage he did, things like that. When you play multiplayer and you hit a guy across the map in the face with an arrow, there's some I guess I would call it pride text, where it's like headshot, damage, you're awesome, look at this awesome stuff you did, and that's a pretty good quick visual feedback. And
yeah, I really like that too. We don't actually have that popping up in this version of build. This build is actually it's over a week old.
Okay.
So we've actually done a lot of improvements. So I mean, what they're seeing here has been polished on as well. So
right. Okay, so that's definitely something we should note. I mean, this isn't the final version, as Zav's killing this guy who seems to be stuck in that wall there.
Yeah, we're actually going to push out the new version, but we couldn't get it out in time for the stream.
Okay.
So I had a phone call right before I got on the show, and I was like, okay, let's try and push it out after the stream, so that because we have people that are going to be playing this afternoon on the retail build. Doing different things, testing and stuff like that. So we had to wait till after the stream.
And I love Zav fighting with the arrows in him. I mean, you get hit with an arrow, it's staying in there. And you probably saw a little bit ago when he's aiming, going to unleash that arrow. He took one right in the arm, and it kind of like jerked him to the left, and then he had to go back and aim again. And it's just like as he's aiming to shoot, he's got this giant arrow sticking out of his arm, which is just hysterical to me. Um,
Never take it out or you'll bleed out.
Exactly. That's good. See, that's good stuff. You're helping us learn how to deal with arrow wounds, and I think in this
Yeah.
day and age, in this workaday world, every one of us deals with that situation on a daily basis.
We actually have some arrowheads that you can, when you customize, that will put a person into a bleed state, like almost instantly. And it's based on the arrows that were meant for flesh that had hooks on them, so that you couldn't pull them out, and it
Okay.
would cause massive damage.
It's almost like a serrated knife, right? Or they have
no,
this
it's
kind.
a fish hook. It's
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's really nasty. I was like, it's just sometimes you think about it and you think about, man, people really like they designed this specifically to just do maximum damage to somebody's flesh, and it's kind of an unsettling feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm glad I only experienced this in video games and I didn't have to actually live through this time. I mean, we're kind of live in the sheltered world, right? And
Yeah.
now it's like,
No, absolutely. I mean, you watch a Liam Neeson movie and you think that's brutal. It's like, no. I mean, imagine being covered in blood for, I don't know, a week. Like, how often did they bathe back then?
Yeah.
Things like that. Um, so this map is pretty nice. This is like a kind of a village type map. Looks like a little conflict out in the field there where everybody was meeting up. Can you talk a bit about like design philosophy as far as maps go? I mean, you want them to be kind of intricate. You want them to be, I imagine you want them to be kind of diverse and everything. But what's the balancing act between making it too big, where you're not fighting enough, or making it too small, where everybody's getting clustered together? Like, what's that kind of sweet spot you aim for?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, it's just a lot of just a lot of iteration on the level and playing with and having your QA team playing, having focus groups come and play the maps, and we have telemetry, we have heat maps, we can see where a lot of people are dying, and you
Right.
just kind of play around with it, and a lot of it's gut instinct. We have a lead level designer who's been around for a long time. He worked on like Just Cause and different bigger titles like that. So he's been in the game for quite some time as well. I mean, going back to the 13-man team scenario, it's like we're 13 guys, but we're all guys that have been around for a long time. So our experience runs deep, and so I think it's a little bit of that. And I always believe that making a believable environment, it helps that thing happen naturally. And of course, there's some shaping. Our lead level designer thought a lot about trying to create natural flow points where conflicts would happen and scenarios happen. But luckily, we're set. One benefit we have is that most of our combat is melee focused, and it is that close quarter combat. So people gravitate towards each other, also. So that the benefit of the gameplay style kind of led to people grouping together a lot more than in a shooter where you could keep a distance, and it was more about killing your enemy as far away as possible, to reduce the danger. Whereas our game is you have to get as close as possible to actually kill your enemy.
Right.
Those kind of two things kind of led to it happening in an easy way. But I think really I always said to the team is like, I want the maps to look believable. It should look like a real place, like somebody could have possibly lived here. Somebody could be a real place. And we also used like overhead maps from Google Maps to get where the rivers were, the creeks and stuff like that, so that so there was some real world relevance to that.
Right. Cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up because we're getting close. Well, we're 1 minute away from our hour here, and we both have things we have to do, I'm sure. But yeah, you've been watching War of the Roses on Joystiq here on Twitch, and we want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you, Gordon Van Dyke, senior producer, Paradox Interactive, for chilling out with me here for this hour and talking about your game. And when's it launched? Price? It's going to be on Steam.
Yeah, so its official launch is October 2nd. We actually have pre-orders available on Steam and through our digital partners. So we have like Amazon, GameStop's digital distribution for PC, their channel. Um, we have it on Gamersgate and several others. If they go to the War of the Roses, thegame.com, we have a buy page where you can find all our partners. And right now, if you pre-order, you get upgraded to the digital deluxe edition. So through Steam, you get the Lancaster one, which is they were the Red Rose house, and then through all of our other partners, you can get the House of York, which was the White Rose. And there's a lot of cool themed stuff specifically to those houses that you get in that deluxe edition. And if you do the pre-purchase before September 25th, you get early access. So you'll get to start September 25th playing the game.
Cool.
You get a little start.
All right, sounds good. All right, October 2nd. Thank you very much, Gordon, and thank you guys for joining us. And you've been watching War of the Roses on Twitch TV's Joystiq channel for Joystiq. I'm from Joystiq. Gordon's not from Joystiq. All right, thank you guys.